The ship floated in the darkness like a dead whale in a black ocean. No lights, no signals, just cold metal turning slowly in the endless void of space. Park pressed her face against the window of the salvage vessel Wandering Star and watched the derelict ship grow larger. Her breath made small clouds on the glass. Behind her, the other crew members talked in low voices, none of them excited about what they saw. "Another empty hull," said the captain. He was a creature with 4 arms and eyes like polished stones. His voice clicked and rattled when he spoke. "Probably picked clean already." "The scanner shows something inside," said. She turned from the window and held up her handheld device. "Life signs, faint but there." The crew went quiet. Life signs meant survivors. Survivors meant complications. "Could be animals," said one of the crew, a tall reptilian named. "Could be parasites, could be a trap." "Could be people who need help," said. Made a sound like laughter but not friendly. Humans, always so eager to save things. Did not respond. She had learned in her 2 years with this crew that arguing with was like arguing with a wall. The wall would not change its mind, and she would only lose her voice. Captain studied the derelict ship on the main screen. His 4 hands moved across the controls, pulling up data and running scans. After a long moment, he turned to. "You want to go aboard?" he said. It was not a question. "Yes, Captain." "The life signs are weak. Whatever is in there may already be dead by the time you reach it." "Then I should hurry." Made a clicking sound that had learned meant he was thinking. The other species on the crew often said humans were too emotional, too soft, too quick to risk themselves for strangers, but had served with humans before. He knew that this softness was also a kind of strength. "Go," he said, "but be careful. If anything feels wrong, you come back immediately." Nodded and grabbed her gear. The airlock connected to the derelict ship with a heavy clunk that felt in her bones. She waited for the pressure to equalize, then stepped through into darkness. Her flashlight cut a narrow path through the black. The air was thin and cold, almost too cold to breathe. Frost covered the walls in patterns that looked like white lace. Her boots made crunching sounds on the frozen floor. She checked her scanner. The life signs were coming from deeper inside the ship, somewhere in the cargo section. She walked slowly, carefully, her eyes moving from shadow to shadow. The ship had been beautiful once. She could see it in the curved walls, the elegant doorways, the soft colors that showed through the frost. This was not a cargo ship or a military vessel. This was something made for passengers, for families. The thought made her chest feel tight. What had happened here? Where had everyone gone? She found bodies in the 3rd corridor. 2 adult creatures, their silver-blue fur covered in ice. They looked like something between foxes and bears, with long ears and short snouts. Their eyes were closed, their bodies curled together as if they had tried to keep each other warm in their final moments. Knelt beside them and touched one gently, frozen solid, dead for days, maybe weeks. "I'm sorry," she whispered. She did not know if they could hear her. She did not know if the dead could hear anything, but it felt wrong to pass them without saying something. Her scanner beeped. The life signs were close now, just ahead, through a sealed door. Stood and approached the door. It was locked, but the power was dead, and she found the manual release after a few minutes of searching. The door groaned and scraped open, revealing a small cargo hold. And there, huddled in the corner, were 3 small shapes. Cubs, Bobby's children. His heart stopped. Then it started again, beating so hard she could hear it in her ears. The cubs were tiny, no bigger than house cats. Their silver-blue fur was dirty and matted. Their large amber eyes stared at her with a mixture of fear and hope that made want to cry. She moved slowly, carefully, the way her grandmother had taught her to approach frightened animals back on Earth. She lowered herself to her knees and made herself as small as possible. "Hello," she said softly. "I'm not going to hurt you, I promise." The cubs pressed closer together. The smallest one let out a sound like a whimper, pulled out her scanner and pointed it at them. The device hummed for a moment, then displayed something that made her eyes go wide. Species origin: Earth-adjacent genetic markers detected. Classification: Earthborn cubs, Terran-compatible biology. Earth-adjacent: the cubs shared genetic ancestry with Earth mammals. Somewhere in the distant past, their species and Earth's creatures had come from the same source. They were, in some strange and ancient way, related to the animals of her home world. Related to her. Put the scanner away and extended her hand, palm up, fingers relaxed. She did not move closer. She simply offered. The two larger cubs stayed where they were, watching with wide eyes. But the smallest one, the one who had whimpered, began to move. Slowly, shakily, it crawled forward on unsteady legs. Held her breath. The cub reached her hand and stopped. Its small nose twitched. It sniffed her fingers, her palm, her wrist. Then it looked up at her with those huge amber eyes, and something passed between them, something old and deep and impossible to name. The cub pressed its nose against her palm. In that moment, felt something click into place, like a key turning in a lock she had not known existed. The cub was not just accepting food or warmth, it was accepting her, choosing her. The other two cubs watched their sibling for a long moment. Then, one by one, they crept forward and pressed their noses to his hand as well. Felt tears running down her face, freezing on her cheeks in the cold air. She did not wipe them away. She did not move at all. She simply knelt there in the dark, in the cold, in the middle of a dead ship, while three orphaned cubs chose her as their own. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, I've got you, I've got you." She gathered them gently in her arms. They were so light, so fragile, so cold. She tucked them inside her jacket against her chest, where they could feel her heartbeat. They pressed close to her warmth and closed their eyes. Stood slowly and began the long walk back to the airlock. Her scanner had found what it was looking for: life signs, survivors. 3 small lives that now depended on her. As she walked through the frozen corridors, past the bodies of the cubs' parents, made a silent promise. She did not know what species these cubs were. She did not know what challenges lay ahead. She did not know if her crew would accept them or if the galaxy would let her keep them. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She would protect them, no matter what. The cubs shifted against her chest, making small sounds of comfort. They had been alone in the dark for so long. They had watched their parents die. They had waited in the cold, growing weaker and weaker, with no hope of rescue. And then had come. She carried them through the airlock and back onto the wandering star. The crew stared at her, at the small shapes tucked inside her jacket. Stone eyes showed no expression, but his 4 hands went still. "What," said slowly, "is that?" Looked down at the cubs, then back at her crew. "Family," she said. And she walked past them all, heading for the medical bay, holding the cubs close to her beating heart. The medical bay of the wandering star was small and cold, but it was warm compared to the derelict ship. Sat on the examination table with the 3 cubs still pressed against her chest. They had not moved since she brought them aboard. They clung to her like she was the only solid thing in a universe made of smoke. Walked in quietly, carrying blankets and a medical kit. He was the ship's medic, a Korean man in his late 20s with gentle hands and a face that rarely showed strong emotion. But when he saw the cubs, his eyes went soft. "They're so small," he said. "They're starving," said, "and cold and scared." Nodded and set to work. He moved slowly and carefully, letting the cubs see everything he did before he did it. He checked their temperatures, their heart rates, their hydration levels. The cubs watched him with wide eyes but did not growl or pull away. "They trust you," said two. "That's why they're letting me help." "They chose me," said. "I don't know why, but they did." Looked at her for a long moment. Then he returned to his work. The next few hours passed in a blur of feeding and warming and cleaning. The cubs drank nutrient solution from small bottles, their tiny tongues working eagerly, held each one in turn, feeling their cold bodies slowly grow warm against her skin, wrapped them in soft blankets and monitored their vital signs on his tablet. By the time the cubs fell asleep, curled together in a nest of blankets on the examination table, was exhausted, but she did not want to leave them. "You should rest," said. "I will soon." Sat down beside her. For a while neither of them spoke. They just watched the cubs sleep, their small chests rising and falling in steady rhythm. "Do you know what species they are?" asked. "The scanner said they have Earth-adjacent genetics, Terran-compatible biology," shook her head. "I don't know what that means exactly, but they're connected to Earth somehow, to us." Pulled up information on his tablet, searching through the ship's database. After a few minutes, he found what he was looking for. He said, "That's what they're called. They're a mammalian species from the inner systems, highly respected, very old culture." He paused, reading more. "It says here that cubs are considered sacred. They're protected by law across most of the galaxy." "Sacred," repeated. "Taking them without permission is a serious crime." Looked at the sleeping cubs. "I didn't take them, I found them dying, I saved them." "I know," said, "but their government might not see it that way." The next morning, Captain called to the bridge. The rest of the crew was already there, standing in a loose circle around the main console. Their faces were not friendly. "We received a transmission," said. His voice was flat without emotion. "From the government, they know we have their cubs." Stomach dropped. "How?" "The derelict ship had an emergency beacon. It activated when you opened the cargo hold. They have been tracking us since we left." Stepped forward, his reptilian eyes cold. "They're demanding we return the cubs immediately. They're sending a ship to intercept us." "We should hand them over," said another crew member, a small furry creature named. "We don't want trouble with they're powerful. They have connections everywhere." Felt anger rising in her chest, but she kept her voice calm. "The cubs are sick and traumatized. They need stability, not to be handed off to strangers." "They're not your children," said. "They're not even your species." "They chose me." "Animals don't choose," snapped. "They follow instinct. They went to you because you were warm and you fed them, that's all." Opened her mouth to argue, but raised one of his four hands for silence. "There is more," the captain said. He pressed a button on the console, and a holographic image appeared in the center of the room. It was a recording from the government. An old creature appeared, female, with silver fur streaked with white. Her eyes were sharp and intelligent, and her voice carried the weight of authority. "I am Elder of the High Council," the recording said. "You have taken 3 cubs of our species from a vessel in distress. These cubs are sacred to our people. Their well-being is our highest concern. You will surrender them to our custody when our ship arrives. There will be no negotiation." The recording ended. The bridge was silent. Felt something harden inside her. She had spent 2 years being dismissed by this crew, being told that humans were too emotional, too soft, too weak. She had stayed quiet and done her job and tried to fit in. But this was different. This was not about her pride or her feelings. This was about 3 small lives that had no one else to fight for them. "No," she said. Every head in the room turned toward her. "No," repeated. "You're refusing an order from the High Council." "I'm refusing to abandon 3 orphans who have already lost everything." Stood straight, her hands steady at her sides. "They watched their parents die. They waited alone in the cold for days, and when I found them, they chose me. They pressed their noses to my hand and they chose me." "That means nothing," said. "It means everything." Studied with his stone eyes. "They will not accept this. They will take the cubs by force if necessary." "Then let them try." The words came out before could stop them. She heard gasps from some of the crew. Even, who had followed her to the bridge, looked surprised, but did not take the words back. She meant them. That night sat in the cargo bay with the cubs. They had woken from their sleep and were exploring their new environment, sniffing at crates and climbing over each other with clumsy enthusiasm. They were still weak, still thin, but they were alive. They were healing. Had given them names. The smallest one, the one who had chosen her first, she called. It meant barley in Korean, a simple grain that grew strong in harsh conditions. The second one, slightly larger with darker fur on its ears, she called. It meant the world. The third one, the most energetic of the three, she called. It meant sky. And her cubs found her there, sitting cross-legged on the floor while climbed over her legs and batted at her fingers. I ran more scans, he said, sitting down beside her. Their stress hormones have dropped significantly since you brought them aboard. Their heart rates are stable. Their sleep patterns are healthy. He paused. They feel safe with you. Their bodies know it even if they can't say it in words. Stroked soft fur. The cub had crawled into her lap and was pressing its face against her stomach, listening to her heartbeat. "They will say I stole them," she said. "You saved them. Will that matter?" Was quiet for a moment. "I don't know, but I know this. Those cubs have been through something terrible. They lost their parents. They were alone and dying. And then you came and you didn't leave them. You didn't hand them off to someone else. You held them and fed them and kept them warm." He looked at her. "That matters. That has to matter." Shifted in its lap, raising one small paw and placing it gently on her chest, right over her heart. Went very still. "What is that?" whispered. "I don't know." But something inside her knew, something deep and old and impossible to explain. The cub looked up at her with those huge amber eyes, and felt the connection between them like a physical thing, like a thread stretching from her heart to the cub's. She did not understand what it meant. She did not know the customs of or the significance of this gesture. But she knew, with absolute certainty, that she would never let anyone take these cubs from her. Not ever. Waypoint Station 14 hung in space like a metal flower, its docking arms stretching out in all directions. Ships of every size and shape surrounded it, coming and going like bees around a hive. It was neutral territory, a place where different species could meet and trade without the laws of any single government. It was also where they had demanded the meeting take place. Stood at the window of the Wandering Star's observation deck, watching the station grow larger as they approached. Her stomach was tight with worry, but her hands were steady. Behind her, and played together on a blanket, their small bodies tumbling over each other in a game only they understood. In the 2 days since she had found them, the cubs had grown stronger. They ate well, slept well, and followed everywhere she went. When she walked, they walked behind her. When she sat, they climbed into her lap. When she slept, they curled around her like a living blanket. The crew had noticed. Some of them looked at her differently now, with something that might have been respect. Even had stopped making comments about humans being soft. He still did not like her, but he had seen the way the cubs responded to her. He could not deny what was in front of his eyes. "We're docking in 10 minutes, Captain's voice came through the speaker. "The delegation is already aboard the station. They're waiting." Took a deep breath. "I'm ready." Appeared at her side. He had insisted on coming with her to the meeting. "As moral support," he had said, "and because someone needs to make sure you don't do anything too brave." Had smiled at that. Had a way of making her feel less alone. They gathered the cubs and made their way to the airlock. The rest of the crew watched them go, their faces showing a mix of worry and curiosity. Whatever happened next would affect them all. The station's corridors were crowded with beings from dozens of different species. Walked through them with the cubs pressed close to her legs, rode in her arms, too tired from playing to walk, and stayed on either side of her, their small eyes watching everything. The meeting room was large and circular, with a high ceiling and walls that curved like the inside of an egg. Seats lined the edges, and in the center stood a raised platform where speakers could address the crowd. The delegation was already there. Stopped in the doorway, her heart pounding. There were at least 20 in the room, all adults, all larger than the cubs by far. Their silver-blue fur gleamed under the lights, their amber eyes fixed on with expressions that ranged from anger to suspicion to cold calculation. At the front of the group stood Elder. She was old, her fur faded to almost white, but her eyes were sharp and fierce. Beside her stood warriors in ceremonial armor and priests in flowing robes. This was not just a delegation. This was a show of power. "Bring forward the cubs," Elder commanded. Her voice echoed in the chamber. Walked to the center of the room at her side. The cub stayed with her, pressing against her legs, buried its face in her neck, whimpering softly. "I am Park," she said. Her voice was steadier than she expected. "I found these cubs on a derelict ship in the Outer Rim. Their parents were dead. The cubs were dying. I brought them aboard my ship and cared for them." "You took them," Elder said. "Without permission, without authority. You, a human, took sacred children of the—" "I saved them." "That is not your decision to make." The Elder stepped forward, her eyes burning. "Cubs belong with, they must be raised in our traditions, taught our ways, connected to our ancestors. You cannot give them what they need. You are not one of us." "They chose me." A murmur ran through the delegation. Some of them shifted uncomfortably. Others leaned forward with sudden interest. "What did you say?" asked one of the priests, a young male with markings on his face. "They chose me," repeated. She knelt down so that was at eye level with the— "When I found them, I did not grab them or force them to come with me. I waited. I offered my hand, and the smallest one came to me and pressed its nose to my palm. The others followed." "Instinct," Elder said dismissively. "They were cold and hungry. They would have gone to anyone." "No," shook her head. "My scanner detected Earth-adjacent genetics. These cubs and I share ancestry. They recognize something in me, something familiar." "Impossible," another said. "Humans are primitive. You have no connection to us." "The data says otherwise." Stepped forward and held up his tablet. "I can show you the scans if you wish. The genetic markers are clear, and Earth mammals share common ancestors from millions of years ago. The cubs responded to Lieutenant Park because, on some deep biological level, she feels like family to them." The room erupted in angry voices. Several shouted at once, their words overlapping into chaos. Elder raised her hand and the room went quiet. "Even if what you say is true," she said slowly, "it does not matter. Law is clear. Cubs belong with their own kind. You will surrender them now." "No." The word hung in the air. Every eye in the room turned too. "No," Elder's voice was ice. "You dare refuse." Stood up, holding close, and pressed against her legs, their small bodies trembling. They could feel the tension in the room. They were scared. "These cubs have been through something terrible," said. "They lost their parents. They were alone in the dark, in the cold, waiting to die. And then I came. I didn't know what species they were. I didn't know about your laws or your traditions. I only knew that they were children and they needed help." She paused, looking around the room at the angry faces. "I held them against my chest so they could feel my heartbeat. I fed them when they were hungry. I kept them warm when they were cold. I stayed with them through the night so they wouldn't be alone." Her voice cracked, but she kept going. "And they chose me. They put their paws on my heart and they chose me as their guardian." The young priest who had spoken earlier suddenly stepped forward. His eyes were fixed on, still pressed against his chest. "Show me," he said. "Show me what the cub does." "Look down at." The cub looked back at her with those huge amber eyes. Then slowly, it raised one small paw and placed it over her heart. The priest gasped. He fell back a step, his face pale. "The bonding gesture," he whispered. The room went absolutely silent. Even Elder's cold expression flickered with something that might have been shock. "What does that mean?" asked. The priest swallowed hard. The bonding gesture is sacred among our people. When a cub places its paw over a guardian's heart, it creates a bond that cannot be broken. The cub has chosen you as its protector, its parent, its family. She is not, one of the warriors growled. That does not matter. The priest's voice was firm now. The bond does not care about species or politics. The cub has chosen, and by our oldest laws that choice is absolute. Elder's eyes narrowed. She stared at for a long, tense moment. One cub performing the gesture means nothing, she said finally. It could be confusion, trauma, a mistake. As if in response, stepped forward and raised its paw, pressing it to its knee. A moment later did the same. 3 cubs, 3 bonding gestures. The priest lowered his head. They have all chosen her. Elder's face was stone, but her eyes burned with something between fury and disbelief. Very well, she said at last. If the human claims this bond, she will prove it. We will hold a trial. She stepped closer until they were almost touching. You will face the trial of the heart. You will prove that you are worthy to be their guardian, and if you fail... She leaned in close. You will never see them again. Met her gaze without flinching. I accept. The ship was called the Temple of Soft Paws. It was ancient, older than most civilizations in the galaxy, and it showed. The walls were carved with images of cubs playing in forests and fields. The floors were worn smooth by countless generations of feet. The air smelled of incense and old wood and something sweet that could not name. She walked through the corridors with at her side. He had insisted on being her second for the trial, a role that meant he would share her fate. If she failed, he would be punished too. You don't have to do this, had told him. I know, he had replied. I want to. The cubs had been taken to a separate room where caretakers watched over them. Had not wanted to let them go, but the priests had assured her it was only temporary. The cubs would be returned to her after the trial. If she passed. Elder met them at the entrance to the trial chamber. Her face showed no emotion, but her eyes were sharp and watchful. The trial of the heart has 3 tests, she said. Each test measures a different quality that a guardian must possess. Sacrifice, understanding, protection. She paused. No outsider has ever taken this trial before. Most assume you will fail. What do you think? Asked. Elder studied her for a long moment. I think you are either very brave or very foolish, perhaps both. She stepped aside, and the doors to the trial chamber opened. The first test was called the test of sacrifice. Stood in a room that had been transformed into a recreation of a marketplace. Tables lined the walls, covered with objects of every kind. Jewelry, food, clothing, tools, and at the center of the room, a mountain of what looked like gold coins. Before you are riches beyond measure, said the voice of an unseen judge. Wealth that could buy ships, planets, entire systems. It is yours to take. Looked at the treasure. She had grown up poor on Earth in a small village in the mountains. She knew what it meant to have nothing, to worry about food and warmth and survival. The gold glittered under the lights, promising an end to all worry. But, the voice continued, if you take the treasure, the cubs will be given to another guardian. They will be cared for, but not by you. You will never see them again. The choice was simple, wealth or the cubs. Did not hesitate. She turned away from the treasure and walked toward the door on the other side of the room. I don't need gold, she said. I need them. The door opened. She had passed the first test. The second test was called the test of understanding. Found herself in a room that was almost completely dark. The only light came from a small opening in the ceiling, casting a pale beam onto the floor. And in that beam of light stood a creature. It was a beast, something like a wolf but larger, with thick silver fur and teeth like knives. Its eyes glowed red in the darkness, and it growled low in its throat as entered. This is a guardian wolf, said the judge's voice. They are bonded to families and protect cubs from danger, but this one has been hurt, betrayed, it trusts no one. If you cannot calm it, you will not leave this room alive." The beast snarled and took a step toward her. Could see the scars on its body, the old wounds that had never fully healed. This creature had suffered. She thought of the cubs, they had suffered too. They had been hurt and scared and alone, and yet they had trusted her. They had chosen her. Maybe this beast could choose her too. Sat down on the floor, making herself small and unthreatening. The beast watched her, its red eyes narrow with suspicion. "I know you're scared," said softly. "I know someone hurt you, but I'm not going to hurt you, I promise." The beast growled again, but it did not attack. Closed her eyes and began to hum. It was a song her grandmother had sung to her when she was a child, on cold nights in the mountains of Korea. A simple melody, soft and slow, about the moon and the stars and the love that never fades. She did not know if the beast could understand the song. She did not know if music meant anything to creatures from other worlds. But she sang anyway, because it was all she had to offer. Minutes passed, the growling stopped. Opened her eyes. The beast was lying down in front of her, its massive head resting on its paws. Its eyes were still watchful, but the red glow had faded to a soft amber. Slowly, carefully, reached out her hand. The beast sniffed it, then pressed its nose against her palm. Just like the cubs had done. The lights in the room came on, the door opened, had passed the second test. The third test was called the test of protection. Stood in a room that looked like an open field under a gray sky. The grass was real beneath her feet, the wind was cold on her face. It felt like being outside, even though she knew she was still inside the ship. And there in the center of the field were His heart leaped. She started to run toward them, but a voice stopped her. "Wait." From the edges of the field, shadows began to emerge. They took the shape of predators, wolves, bears, things with too many teeth and eyes. They were not real, new. They were holograms, projections designed to test her, but they looked real. They sounded real, and they were moving toward the cubs. "A guardian must be willing to die for those in their care," said the judge's voice. "Will you?" The predators charged. Did not think, she ran. She reached the cubs just as the first predator lunged. She threw herself over them, covering their small bodies with her own. She felt claws rake across her back, teeth snap near her ear. The pain was real, even if the predators were not. The simulation was designed to test more than courage. It was designed to test commitment. Held the cubs close and closed her eyes. She felt shaking against her chest. She felt and pressing into her sides. They were scared, but they did not run. They stayed with her. "I've got you," she whispered. "I've got you, I'm not going anywhere." The attack stopped. The predators vanished. The field dissolved into the plain walls of the trial chamber. Looked up, Elder stood before her, surrounded by priests and warriors. Their faces showed shock, respect, and something that might have been wonder. "You threw yourself over them," Elder said slowly. "You did not hesitate." "They're my family," said. Her voice was hoarse. Her back burned with pain, but she did not let go of the cubs. "I would die for them." Elder was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "You have passed 3 tests," she said. 3 tests that many have failed. You have shown sacrifice, understanding, and protection." She paused. "But I am not satisfied." His heart sank. "There is a 4th test," Elder continued. "One that has not been used in centuries, the dream of the pack." Her eyes met. "You will enter a shared psychic space with the cubs. If their spirits accept you there, you may keep them forever. But if they reject you—" She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. "If they reject me," asked, "you will not wake." Stepped forward, his face pale. "You can't ask her to risk her life like this. She's already proven herself." "She has proven herself to us," Elder said. "But the cubs must choose her one final time, in the deepest part of their souls." She looked at, "Do you accept?" looked down at the cubs in her arms. They looked back at her with those huge amber eyes, full of trust and love and something she could not name. She thought of the derelict ship, the cold, the darkness, the small bodies huddled together waiting to die. She thought of her grandmother's lullaby, the warmth of her heartbeat, the promise she had made. She looked up at Elder. "I accept," opened her eyes and found herself in a forest. The trees were taller than any she had seen on Earth, their branches reaching up toward a sky filled with 3 moons. Silver light poured down through the leaves, casting strange shadows on the ground. The air was cold and clean, smelling of pine and snow and something wild. She was alone. Stood slowly looking around. The forest stretched in every direction, endless and ancient. She could hear sounds in the distance, water flowing, wind moving through branches, something howling far away. "Hello," she called. Her voice seemed small in the vastness of the forest. No answer came. She began to walk. She did not know where she was going, but standing still felt wrong. The dream of the pack was a psychic space, Elder had explained, a place where spirits met and chose each other. The cubs would find her here or they would not. All could do was wait and hope. She walked for what felt like hours. The forest changed around her, shifting from pine to oak to trees she did not recognize. The 3 moons moved across the sky, casting different colors of light, silver, gold, pale blue. It was beautiful and strange and lonely. And then she heard them. Small voices carried on the wind, not words exactly, but something like words, feelings shaped into sound. She turned toward the voices and saw 3 shapes emerging from the shadows between the trees. But they were different here, larger, more solid. Their silver-blue fur glowed faintly in the moonlight, and their amber eyes held an intelligence that seemed ancient beyond their years. They approached her slowly, moving as one, their eyes never leaving her face. Knelt down to meet them. Her heart was pounding, but her hands were steady. "Hello," she said softly. "I've been looking for you." The cubs stopped a few feet away from her. They looked at each other, communicating in that silent way they had, then stepped forward. When it spoke, the words came not through sound but through thought. They pressed against mind like gentle fingers. "Why do you stay?" asked. Considered the question. She could have given many answers because she had found them, because the scanner had shown their shared ancestry, because she had made a promise. But in this place, in this moment, only the truth would do. "Because you needed me," she said, "and because I needed you." "Others would have left us," said. "Others have left us before." Felt a sharp pain in her chest. She thought of the derelict ship, the frozen bodies of the cubs' parents. Had someone else found that ship before her? Had someone else seen the cubs and walked away? "I couldn't leave you," she said. "When I saw you in that cargo hold, so small and scared and alone, I knew I couldn't walk away. I knew I had to help." "Why?" pressed. "We are not your kind, we are not human." The forest shifted around them. Suddenly was no longer kneeling in the silver light. She was standing in the cargo hold of the derelict ship, surrounded by cold and darkness. The cubs were there too, huddled together, tiny and weak. And she saw herself, a figure in a thick jacket, flashlight cutting through the dark, face tight with worry. She watched as the memory played out. She watched herself kneel down, extend her hand, wait with infinite patience. She watched creep forward and press its nose to her palm. And she felt what the cubs had felt in that moment. Hope, after days of darkness and cold and despair, hope. The vision shifted again. Now she was in the medical bay of the wandering star. She watched herself feeding the cubs, warming them, singing to them through the night. She felt their fear slowly melting away, replaced by something warm and safe. Trust. Another shift. The confrontation with Elder, standing alone against 20, her voice steady even though her hands wanted to shake. The cubs watching from below, feeling her courage like a flame in the darkness. Protection. And finally, the trials, walking away from mountains of gold, sitting in the dark with the guardian wolf, singing her grandmother's song, throwing herself over the cubs as predators attacked from all sides. Sacrifice, understanding, love. The visions faded, found herself back in the moonlit forest, the cubs standing before her. "You are not," said again, but this time the words were not a challenge, they were a question. "No," admitted. "I'm human. I was born on a small planet called Earth, in a village in the mountains. I grew up poor and scared and often alone. I joined a salvage crew because I wanted to see the stars, but sometimes the stars feel very cold and very far away." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I don't know your traditions. I don't speak your language. I can't teach you to be because I don't know what that means." She looked at each of the cubs in turn. "But I can teach you what it means to be loved. I can teach you that you are never alone, that someone will always fight for you, that family is not just about blood or species or where you come from." Tears were running down her face now. She did not wipe them away. "I can teach you what my grandmother taught me," she said, "that the love we give away is the only love we get to keep." The cubs were silent, the forest was silent, even the wind had stopped. Then stepped forward. It looked up at with those huge amber eyes and for a moment saw something beyond the cub. She saw generations of, stretching back through time. Mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters, ancestors who had loved and been loved in turn. And she saw herself among them. A human, yes. A stranger, yes, but also family. Raised its paw and pressed it to his heart. "You are ours," it said, "and we are yours." And stepped forward and did the same, their small paws pressing against her chest. "Forever," they said together, "no matter what." The forest blazed with light. The three moons merged into one, brilliant and blinding. Felt something change inside her, something deep and permanent. A bond, stronger than steel, warmer than fire. She was no longer alone. She would never be alone again. Opened her eyes. She was lying on a soft bed in the temple of soft paws. The cubs were curled around her, their small bodies pressed against her sides. Sat in a chair nearby, his face pale with worry. When he saw her eyes open, he nearly fell out of his chair with relief. "You're awake," he breathed. "You're alive." "I'm alive," agreed. Her voice was rough, but she was smiling. Elder appeared in the doorway. Her face was still, unreadable, but her eyes had changed. The coldness was gone, replaced by something that might have been respect. "The cubs chose you," she said. "In the deepest place where there can be no lies, they chose you as their guardian." She bowed her head just slightly. "The pack has spoken." The young priest appeared behind her. "It will be recorded in our histories," he said. "The first human to bond with cubs, the first outsider to pass the trial of the heart." He smiled. "You have made history today." Looked down at the cubs sleeping against her side. Her children now, in every way that mattered. "I didn't want to make history," she said. "I just wanted to keep them safe." Elder nodded slowly. "Perhaps that is why you succeeded." 1 year later, walked through a forest on Earth. Not the dream forest but the real forest of her childhood, in the mountains of Korea. Snow covered the ground and hung from the branches of pine trees. Her breath made clouds in the cold air. Beside her walked. He had never quite managed to leave her side after the trial. When she had decided to return to Earth, he had come with her. They had not talked about what they were to each other, not yet. But there was time. Ahead of them, 3 shapes ran through the snow, and had grown in the past year. They were no longer tiny cubs, but young, strong and fast and endlessly curious. Their silver-blue fur stood out bright against the white snow, and their joyful barks echoed through the trees. His grandmother stood on the porch of her small house, watching with wonder. "Aliens," she had said when first brought the cubs home. "My granddaughter brings home aliens." "Their family," had replied. Her grandmother had looked at the cubs for a long moment. Then she had smiled and begun cooking enough food for 5. Now the old woman waved from the porch as the cubs raced past, chasing each other through the snow, laughed and tried to catch, who dodged with easy grace. Stopped walking and watched them. Her family, strange and wonderful in hers, came bounding back to her, snow covering its fur. It stood on its hind legs and pressed its paw to her knee, a gesture that had become their special greeting. "I know," said, kneeling down to meet the cub's eyes. "I love you too." Its amber eyes shone with happiness. Then it turned and ran back to join its siblings, leaving alone for a moment in the quiet forest. She looked up at the sky. Somewhere out there beyond the blue, the stars were waiting. They were watching. The galaxy was spinning on, vast and ancient and full of wonders. But here, in this forest, in this moment, had everything she needed. A grandmother who had taught her to love, a partner who had chosen to stay, 3 cubs who had pressed their paws to her heart and claimed her as their own. She had gone looking for treasures among the stars. She had found something better. She had found home. The cubs' voices echoed through the trees, calling her name. Was waving, his smile bright against the cold. Her grandmother was opening the door, the smell of warm food drifting out into the winter air. Took a deep breath of cold mountain air and walked toward them. Toward her family. Toward her future. Toward love.